All right, we are in the house, not out on the water, not out on the testing casting field. We did do some testing today, so I wanted to let you guys in on what I tested out, what my results were, kind of thing. Did I find anything new? No. Maybe? I don't know. But anyway, what I started out doing was, these two weren't even in the picture. I really didn't even think about putting those in until I got done with the others. I'm like, you know what? I ought to just get those other ones out and see what they'll do. So yesterday, till my hands totally froze off, I was basically throwing this worm. It weighs just over 6 grams. Excuse me, it's like 6.5, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, it's hard to throw if you guys remember right. So it's kind of what I use a lot of these different reels to set, because if you can set your brakes on almost any reel that's capable of casting this, like a fishable distance anywhere from 60 to 70 feet, kind of with no wind, and then you can pretty much throw everything else and you don't have to worry about backlashing. So I decided today to see if my magnets helped out on this reel, and just to put it up against, again, like the regular LingL and then the LingL variant that has the different braking, right? And then while I was doing that, I thought, I ought to go ahead and include this little dude. So I pulled the deep spool out, put the shallow spool in, and included it in this little makeshift run ahead. And then while I was doing that, I'm like, you know what? Let's just see. And I wanted to, just kind of get this close to set up and ready to use kind of deal. So I took it out also, Calcutta Conquest BFS. And I didn't really, it was windy. So I had the wind, like there was a wind blowing kind of sideways, almost at me at times. So it was not really where you could go out and put a true, versus one's casting further than the other. But it kind of let me see which ones are easier, whether it be to set or just to cast once I got them set there. And what I found out is that most of them I can just, once I find a setting and I'm throwing into the wind, then when the wind's not blowing, I may be able to tell it's slightly, slowing the cast down a touch, but like you can go out and fish with that at any given time. So what I found out was that I couldn't hardly get any extra distance off any of these reels. I guess I might say that the Conquest, that's the chameleon spool, did it easier, but I found it, and this doesn't really have numbers, it's just a dial. So if you look, there's, all the way down, all the way up. So it wasn't quite turned halfway up. It was about where I could get it with throwing this bait. And then I also would put this bait on and not change it and just see how far I could throw that bait compared to that bait. So although I didn't go measure them, I had a rough estimate that almost every one of these did the same thing, as far as however far they could throw that one, they could only throw this one on that same setting maybe another 10 feet, and it's a 6 grams. So that's a little heavier, but it's definitely not as aerodynamic as this. I thought I would be able to get a lot further with all these reels than the worm, but it may be, I don't think it was 10 feet. It was probably closer to 7 or 8 feet on like every one of them. But I would say that this reel probably, I don't even know if I could say it did it the easiest. I can tell you one that hung right with them all, and if it wasn't for the crazy loud noise it does make when you cast it, it felt like it was easier, was this guy. Now this spool, I don't think it'll go down. It's definitely not quite as capable as the Dark Wolf Ultra shallow spool with the, even though they're not dynamic, they're the magnets that go inside like the FTB style. But that spool, this is still a very capable reel, but it still, even with these baits, 6 grams or that worm, because I was casting fairly hard into the wind or side angle with some wind, so I was casting pretty hard. I just, the distances were definitely, not what they were. If you didn't have the wind, you could probably go just a little bit off the brake. So on this one, and what's funny is most of these have the same about setting. So I think that was 4. I think it may have been 1 click past 4. is where that seemed to like it, throwing either one of these baits in the wind. Now the worm's a main one that like it struggled, you know, that's where you're going to get your chance of backlash, especially into the wind throwing a worm. This is a lot easier bait to throw, but about the same. But still, it's like I was throwing this, and I'm just guessing almost all these reels were throwing it close to 60 foot maybe, and I can throw it like when I consider a good combo that throws this worm is about a 70 foot. If you guys remember at the old testing place where across the street, where like right when it's across the street, just as it hit in the grass kind of deal. So I definitely was not there today. I was probably only about equivalent of maybe the middle of the street, if that, because it's pretty windy. But then this bait, on any of these, I could only get that much further at the same brake setting. So let's look at the LingL and the settings. And as you can see, that's right where it was, right on 4 with the LingL. And then this reel that I had to do some modifications in order to get the brakes, what I feel in a workable area, is right on 4 also now. Now, I don't know how it'll work with the deep spool. I need to check it, but I did add, just like we did on the Dark Wolf Ultra with the dynamic, the one that had the dynamic, not the newest one now. So I still have a bunch of these magnets. So I put that 4 by 0.5 millimeter neodyme, whatever they call them, magnets. I stuck one on each deal, and you can turn all the way up to 5, but it restricts it, but they don't drag. So that's actually, in my opinion, a good thing. I'm going to leave these in, because without those in there, you can still use this and it works, but you have to have it like all the way up to 5, and then you can only maybe come 1 back. So you're very limited on if you needed to turn the brakes up more, you really couldn't on this style. The LingL variants that just have the regular MagTrack style brakes. But when you add those little magnets, which, like I mentioned, I have a ton of from the Dark Wolf Ultra, you could probably even get this size, you know, 5 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter would probably even be a little better. Maybe you can maybe go down a few more clicks. But so instead of having just like a one little turn, I have at least a whole number to go. But this is pretty well braked at 4. Like you can throw into the wind, not as well, almost as hard as you want to, and it won't backlash. And I was getting roughly the same distance as these other reels. So all these were what I consider casting good at that setting. It just, you were limited in your distance, but there was like no sign of backlash. If I would go back and cast hard, even one away on any of these two, and then this one, I don't know why. I guess I thought it was right on 4, but maybe it's needs one more pass 4. It's hard to tell on that setting. Yeah, I'd say that's 4, so it needs like one pass 4 is where it seemed to be the best. But it still makes that noise like when I had it in that shootout video doing the long bombing, the 1/2 and 3/4 ounce baits with the deep spool. It still makes that noise when you first cast it, when you first send it. Those bearings or whatever spool up, and it makes a noise. So when I don't have any wind, I'm going to see how well these like go down. Like just going by what we know from previous, it should be this one, and then this one. But I think what I found out is that a lot of these are going to be roughly the same. That the LingL is, I think, closer to be compared to basically this one that has the, you know, different style magnets and a little bit heavier spool, because the LingL could not hold with the Dark Wolf Ultra for the, once you get down into that 2 grams or whatever, but then it does probably do as good if not better when you get up to these kind of baits. And then this one surprised me that I could get it once I added those magnets, that it because I remember these when I first got them, I did not like the way they cast. You tend to have to run the magnets a little, you know, they had a weaker braking. But I guess when we had these, I guess it was before we went through the whole Dark Wolf Ultra and getting magnets or whatever, so I just kind of chalked it up as, they're just not that great. They work, but, you know, regular type baits. But now, I think we have a winner with these, hopefully. You never really know until you just get out and start fishing them, and you know how much of a ease set it and forget it reels are they? Are they just finicky or whatever? So they seem fine. Actually, the only one, which one did I backlash? The only reel that actually backlashed was the one I'm getting ready to talk about, the Bantam. I had one backlash with the Bantam when I turned the brakes, and I turned them a little too far because if you guys know, just like this thing I had some good fluff, but I didn't really actually backlash it. But like when you don't have a click to go by and you try to just turn a little bit, I was a little off on that. So if I guess I would recommend that any of you guys, and I tried it with this. I tried, I thought, well, what the heck? I put each one of those, just like we did on the Dark Wolf Ultra. I took the magnets and I had put, I left it on the if you guys remember right on Dark Wolf Ultra, the last one that doesn't move really, I left out and I put one on each one of these on the three front and the three front over here. You can't do that because, I mean, you could, but you can't turn the brakes up all the way because it will rub. So that tells me it doesn't need them. You like turned all the way up, the magnets are about as close as you can get right from touching kind of deal. So although it would let you like, I could put some on there and then I could maybe dial the brakes, so instead of being at 4 on this, I could be all the way down to 3. And I mean, it's a possibility, something you could do, but then it lets you, basically you can't go all the way to 5. You could probably only go to 4.5 or something. So it's really, I don't think it needs them. Didn't seem to help really in the casting. It just lets you set the dial at a different spot, but it doesn't really need it on that because you still have a long way to go on the brakes. But on this one, it definitely helped because, so if you have a mag tracks or really any brake and you just want to try it, like one way to know is to, take your side plate off, put one of those little, 0.5 millimeter thick magnets on. You probably just use one, put it on, or maybe two, one on each opposite side, and then put it back on, and then just turn your brakes all the way up and see if you can spin the spool. I don't recommend this on a high dollar reel because if you don't want a chance scratching your spool, but I don't really care about these reels as far as if they do get scuffed or whatever. And on this reel, I could turn it all the way up and they didn't drag. I was out there casting it all the way up, and it definitely, you can't, you got to get at least to 4 before it'll give you any kind of distance. So it's got, definitely made the brake stronger, and it's a plus. But I would think you could do this on almost any reel just to try it and see, whether it be an older, and probably wouldn't be on an Abu, but almost any other reel that came from AliExpress, just to double check, is the tolerances on how they designed that, is it working properly? So actually, like on this PW100, Spirit Foxes, stuff like that, put one on each one of those, turn it all the way up, just spin it by hand. If it spins, it probably will make that brake stronger. But these never really seemed to, I don't think we had these turned all the way up, did we? I don't even remember now. That was all the way up, but I don't think you had to have it all the way up. I know I need to get this thing back together and get a purple drag star, clicker, pick out a handle again. That's all it really needs. A couple screws back in it. It's still a very good, capable reel. All right, I just wanted to share that with you, and then I'm going to get out of here in a second, but I also want to share what we found out. Oh, and that is, the eyes aren't deceiving you, that's the handle off of the Zillion, the other Zillion. I want to see what it looked like on there, and I definitely think I like it on there. I don't know if I want to leave 90 millimeter or not. It had the little 80 carbon fiber one. But it doesn't seem to really make it feel too heavy, awkward. So let's get some of these sneezes out of the way. They're coming at you this spring. So let's talk about these two. What did I find out? Is there any puckering to go on, right? No, not really. I couldn't tell that one was any actually better as far as distance or easier than the other. I went down to, or actually I went up. If you guys remember right, I had been going to like 3, I think, is where I primarily live with this when I'm doing cast tests. I can every once in a while go to 2, but I think I ended up on 4 or 5, whatever that is. I ended up there and casting as hard as I want without a fear of a backlash. And so when I got to there, the distances were pretty much even with this on both of those that I was showing you. And then on this guy, I call it like halfway because I got, I think this goes to 6, doesn't it? Anyway, I have 2 of the blocks on the arms, 2 on, 2 off internally, and then we were set at number 3. And the backlash was a pretty good one. I tried to go about halfway between 2 and 3, and and then so I turned it up, but I wasn't quite on 3, and then it still was so fluffing that I was like, oh boy. So 3 is where I felt like I could cast, and it may wanted to start to fluff, but it didn't. Like, I guess initial takeoff, but then it settled itself down before it even became an issue, so I figured that's probably fine. Like, you couldn't hear the line clicking, and it didn't do it every cast, so it's probably right there about on the edge on the way I cast and with throwing the worm. But then I thought this would go further than it did, honestly, with all these reels. None of these reels seem to be... now, I know I could have turned them down, but one of them I tried to turn down a little bit, and it fluffed up. I don't remember what reel it was now, at what point in the little testing I was doing. But this reel definitely surprises me. It's... But these are actually, this is an easy bait to throw, especially without trouble. It's pretty aerodynamic and does cast pretty good. This is pretty hard. What surprised me was that these 2, they kind of tied each other. They didn't beat these smaller, lighter spools, but what surprised me was that they were right there. So maybe a foot or 2 behind on the worm, and they could actually cast this about as far. Like, it would have been very hard to tell, because once you get into this, then they were even, or may have even been ahead of, or right there. Like, it wasn't really as big as what it was with this, and it wasn't big by much. It surprised me because all the others I had just enough line on the empty spool, which is what I got on this one now, was probably 100, 120 foot, not 100% for sure. I just took it off an old spool I had from testing previously. So I usually put about 120 on that like test line when I am throwing these littler baits, because you're not going to throw 120 foot of line off with most of these smaller baits in that, when I was testing that kind of stuff with the 2 and 4 grams and stuff. So I didn't just put it on these spools. Both of these reels had their normal, what I've had on them here lately, which they're not quite down to halfway. They're a little more than halfway full. This one was about the same way, so I just put the line on top of that. So almost as much, and some people probably, that's all they run. Like, sometimes that's all I'll run on a spool. I don't fill it all the way. So, full of braid, they can still go right out there, plenty. I could go fishing with this 16th ounce shaky head VMC with this crazy worm stretching, and still go fishing, which kind of surprised me with these 2. I didn't think that they would be that versatile right off the bat in the wind, kind of deal. I figured they'd either be backlashing, fluffing up to where I have set them so tight that I would be like no distance, way shorter than these other lighter spools, but that wasn't the case. They were right there close. They couldn't get there just because they're that much extra weight of the spools and that kind of stuff. But I know if you get out there where there's not a day when there's not quite as much wind, and if I probably only had them halfway full, which you can go out and fish, especially being the fact they're XGs and the extra high and the gears, 8 to, what's this, 8 to 1, 8 5 to 1. You can spool them halfway and definitely still go out and have plenty of speed to retrieve and get plenty of casting distance. With the lighter line, it'd make it a lighter spool. Might be able to cast lighter baits easier. I'm still going to test that theory. I haven't tested that out yet. So anybody, no questions? So tomorrow I think the cold's coming. Snow probably Wednesday. I don't know if I have any kind of window to do anything tomorrow or not. I'll double check the weather. It all depends on how early I get off work and if it's up in the 40s or warmer, whether I can get out for a little bit. But I'm trying to get my GoPro or do a live stream and trying to get everything ready. Is like I barely had enough time to get out there, what I had in mind, what I wanted to do without, wasn't able to record any of it. So it would have took too much time to get the other stuff, get it set up so good that a live stream could like go one smooth run. I just went out with these. I think I went out with these 3 first, and I brought that dude out and just put him in. Then I ended up bringing these back in, and then I brought those 2 out after my hands warmed up. And I was like, I just want to see where they are with these guys on this bait. I know once you get down very low, then they start separating themselves out. But as far as just overall reels, and then what I wanted to do, I wanted to get the deep spool in on it too, and I didn't. But now out here where I'm kind of playing around at now, I've got an idea of where some stuff starts to land. So I could actually go out there with any other reel, any other spool tomorrow, throw these same 2 things and just see where they're at, kind of deal. And as I get out of here, I'm still trying to figure out, I've watched a couple different videos on the new BFS. I cannot still figure what did they change it to? I think they've made both sides the same, but did they go back down to 50, or is it almost the size of 100? Is it still as small as this? Because if it's not as small as this, I'm 100% out. There ain't no way I'm going to get one. If it's this small, all the way across, I'm definitely probably going to buy that reel. Either way, this reel is going to be for sale. So Charles, if you want to buy it back, let me know. Brew Tank, whoever. I'm still not 100% sure on price. I've looked. You can't get these things for just a stock one you can't find for cheaper than $350. I looked on eBay, looked all over. Just an old 2017 model. They're still going like eBay. I don't know. I thought it sounded kind of high to me, but I'm gonna probably sell that dude for $350 the way it sets. You're gonna have the 50 whatever dollar. I don't even know if you can still get that spool or if they're higher or not. I haven't looked. I probably ought to look at that, but the chameleon spool, the cork knobs, which they're $10, $8 or $9 each. Like every once in a while you catch myself, but it's hard to get them. They're close to $10 a piece, not a pair. And then 50 or 60, whatever that spool is. So knock that down to basically $300 for the reel, $50 for the knobs and the spool. Still got the stock spool and knobs in the deal. You got took. What are you talking about? You traded me this without those knobs and a CU double for another $300 reel in the Geico Pigeon, and then a $165 reel in the whatchamacallit, because it was brand new, hadn't even been fished yet. So I got took, Charles. Told you right when the new one came out, I got took. I can't decide what I want to do now. Do I want to get... I'm still got my mind on a Steez, but I can't justify spending the money on a Steez. Not when I got this sneeze right here and it casts so well. Oh, look, I got another sneeze. And the reason the Joker's not in on it, because this will do the Joker, and this is pretty much the same reel. You're just waiting for what? But yeah, these are... So if I had to tell you guys, like, well, what does that mean? What reel do you recommend? What I recommend is, if you just want something to get out there and get the job done, that thing is hard to beat. $75, roughly $75, almost 80 for the ones with 2 spools. So it'll just go and get a lot of stuff done that I think you can get there with the LingL, but you can't, not for the money. Not for the money. You can't get there with, even if you went, like, you could probably get, like one of these with the mag tracks and then the deep spool, which I'm going to get that because there's a lightweight, halfway deep, almost like a SV style, probably even touch shallower than the SV spool that's real light. I need to just buy that and then try it out in this reel. And I've got the spool that this thing came with, which is a deeper one, but I'm sure it's not going to be as good for like an all-around spool. Maybe okay for, regular bass fishing, but I don't think it'll dive down into the I'm almost positive won't dive down into the BFS stuff worth a darn compared to that spool. But the LingL, they're $100. The one I found for 73, and I need to order that gold spool, but I could get it and the spool they sell for 30. They sell the true LingL spool or the deeper one, which is for their with the different braking system would fit with this one, or the MK9 for $30, and each version of the LingL is still $100 on that site. Then the one with the gold spool and the other braking is $73. So basically, for just over $100, the best way would be to get the one from the other site that has the gold spool, and then order the $30 spool, deep one, and then it'll fit in that reel. Both spools will fit. You don't have the braking system of the old original LingL being the dynamic FTB style and all that, but as I found with that spool right there, you can still, still pretty good. Like, you can't, maybe not for ultralight trout fishing with the stock spool on the LingLs, there's still kind of, you can do it, but man, it's hard to, like a 2 grams and down, it struggles somewhat. It's kind of older technology compared to the Dark Wolf Ultra, Black Knight 2, that with the Chameleon spool, the new Aldebaran, the older Aldebaran with the aftermarket spool, or almost any reel with aftermarket spool, because nobody makes aftermarket spools for none of these AliExpress reels yet, as far as I know. Like their own company may make a different version of something, but like these companies that are putting out the good, the Chameleon spool, the whatever, they're not actually trying to make an even lighter one, because then what they'd have to ask, $50 to $70, you can buy the whole reel for. So yeah, Charles, what'd you have to say? Yeah, I told you I got took. I told Charles that before I left. Charles says he likes the Micro Monster so far. Yeah, that's a good little reel. It's basically this reel. Basically that reel, which this one, I don't know. I guess I've never cast Micro Monster hard. I don't even know if I fished that one. But cast them real hard to see, because I have the other one over here and I remember I thought out there casting the worm with it and the shallow spool on the, of course it's on the feeling rod, which is 6'8". I was using 6'6". I was also seeing how good it was, Carbon Light 2.0, 6'6", but the feeling rod's definitely good at casting these. And I had it out, I don't remember when it was. It wasn't as windy, but I remember spooling up, making the noise like this dude did. They may have an issue with the bearings on the spool bearings on these, because I oiled the other, which would be one side of this is still that bearing, but the other bearing in the deeper spool, I oiled both those bearings. This still kind of makes like a, none of these others have that noise. You can cast them pretty hard, and yeah. So anyway, guys, stay tuned. As soon as I get a good weekend with decent enough weather where I can go out and put these guys head to head, I may try to do one then the other if I get a day this week to try one. I don't really have a good enough place though to get real far distance. Try it half spooled and then fully spooled to see what that is. I'd really have to go out and away for that, and so that means a whole extra amount of time planning and that kind of stuff. I know I could just go out the street and fling it down the neighborhood and hope it doesn't hit a neighbor's car, but I know my luck, the wind would veer off just enough to take out a windshield. So anyway, guys, get out of here. Go bass bonsai, whatever you do. Make sure you have fun doing it, and stay tuned. See if I get a Steez, another Sneasel, another Bantzilla, whatever you call that. And we'll talk to you later. Tom's would work. What are you talking about? I gotta go, Charles. Message me.